What are the best business podcasts to listen to? Now, this is going to depend on you individually. You're going to have to find the best podcast that you're looking for. But in this video, I'm going to actually share some of my favorite business podcasts that I've been listening to as I've scaled up my own business, ad outreach to over 8 figures, landing number 87 on the fastest growing companies in America on the Inc. 5000 list. And in this video, I'm going to break down those podcasts, but also what you should look at when you try to find podcasts for yourself. One of the biggest things that I love about podcasts is being introduced to new ideas, right? New and diverse ideas that allow me to get that new inspiration, that new idea, hearing how other entrepreneurs, other business owners, other marketers have done things in the past, and then learning from those new ideas and getting a real, authentic conversation that I'm able to hear within the podcast, and then I'm able to learn from that and apply that to my day-to-day business and life. I found it really valuable to kind of see that bigger picture into other businesses, how they were able to solve challenges, how they were able to map out their own businesses, craft brand new ideas, and I've just found it's a really great way to get that inspiration. Now, a lot of people ask me, when do I have time to listen to podcasts? Because obviously I'm doing a lot of work during the day, I'm on meetings, I'm planning out, I'm brainstorming, I'm recording content, I'm doing all of these different things. Well, one of my favorite times to listen to podcasts is in N.E.T Time. This is time that you're gonna have available anyways. Maybe it's a commute, maybe you're walking somewhere, you're going out on a walk. Maybe you're getting ready before the day, right? Maybe you're at the end of the day, you're winding down, maybe you're cooking a meal and you're playing a podcast in the background. One of my favorite things to do is listen to a podcast while I'm doing something else, while I'm going somewhere, while I have something else that I need to do, and then playing that in the background so that my mind is learning new ideas. Honestly, one of my favorite times to listen to podcasts is on an airplane. I know some people, they pull up movies, they watch all kinds of different things. Also, some people pull out their laptops and work, and I've definitely done that from time to time. But one of my favorite things to do is just put in my headphones and listen to some great business podcasts so I can get that inspiration and I can really start seeing what other entrepreneurs are doing and how I can apply that to my own business. So look at that N.E.T time. What's time that you're gonna spend anyways that you could be listening, that you could have a podcast playing in the background that you're listening to that's gonna give you that additional inspiration and those ideas. All right, without further ado, let's dive into my favorite business podcast. And the asterisk that I'll have is you should find your own podcast. These aren't the only podcasts you want to listen to. These are just the ones that I found valuable. So I recommend giving these a try, but also going out and seeing which podcast speaks best to you. The first podcast that I love, and I've been listening to this for a very long time, it's How I Built This with Guy Raz. Honestly, this is one of my favorite business podcasts because what Guy does in this podcast is he dives into some of the biggest, incredible businesses and actually talks directly with the founder or CEO, telling him about the entire process and telling you as the listener about the entire process from idea to a fully fledged business, oftentimes, billion-dollar businesses or multi-hundred-million-dollar businesses, really big businesses, but you get to hear how they started. One of my favorite things when you listen to this podcast, especially if you haven't listened to this podcast, any episode of this podcast yet, you are in for a treat because when you listen to this, you see that the entrepreneurs and the business owners who build these billion-dollar businesses are just like you as an entrepreneur. Honestly, this is something that I saw. Wow, if I take a listen to this and I hear somebody about their story, I remember, I'll give you a distinct example, listening to the founder of Squarespace talking about how he started off in a college dorm room. I started a lot of what I did, well, I started before college, but this business, ad outreach, in a college dorm room as well. Talking about how he was putting all the servers together, he was hiring other people, that work with him at his college. It really showed me, wow, this is the same type of journey that I've had. And, of course, as I strive to scale to $1 billion business myself, right? Obviously, there's been a lot of pivots along the way, and that's one of the things you learn, right? You can see the people that built these $1 billion businesses, they started off not unlike you as an entrepreneur as well. So it really unlocks your brain to say, hey, if they can do this, then I can too. Because oftentimes what people look at is the CEO or the founder the way they are now. They're, big and strong. They've got a big, company, billion-dollar company. But when you listen to the founding story from the beginning to where they got to, you really get to understand that they too started from oftentimes humble beginnings. They too started to face challenges early on that they overcame and they persevered, and challenges they thought were insurmountable, but they said, we're gonna solve it anyways. They too had different pivots that they needed to make along the way. And that's something that I think is done so well in How I Built This versus other podcasts, is just the way that Guy is able to go in and talk with them really helps the true story come out, right? It breaks through the barriers, breaks through the talking points, the PR, and gets to the heart of where they started and how they got to where they are right now. The next podcast that I have is one of my personal favorites, is Business Lunch with Roland Frasier. Now, this is really close to home because Roland Frasier is actually a mentor of mine. He runs one of the masterminds that I'm in, War Room, and he honestly is just one of the smartest people that I know. And what he does is he brings in experts, right, within this kind of online marketing, online business community, and he brings them in, or he co-hosts the show with Ryan Deiss, who runs Digital Marketer and also is a co-member of that mastermind. And they bring in either guests or they jam together on the latest online marketing, online business strategies, and also strategies around acquiring businesses, scaling businesses, exiting businesses. There's just a lot of really hands-on, tangible, tactical strategies and advice on that podcast that I find really, really valuable. Honestly, there's different types of podcasts where How I Built This is more of a podcast to get that inspiration, look at a bigger picture, what was the journey of entrepreneur start to finish. When you look at a podcast like Business Lunch, it's designed to give you those actionable ideas that you can implement right now. Now, they bring in incredible guests, but it's the same type of focus. There's the backstory, but you also get some of the actionable details that you can actually implement. It's the same thing in the mastermind that they have as well, that I've actually spoken at several times within War Room, is it's all about getting that actionable insights that you're able to implement right away into your business. So I highly recommend Business Lunch with Roland Frasier, one of the smartest guys that I know. Also proud to have him as a mentor as well. I recommend listening to Business Lunch. That's a really, really actionable podcast that you can listen to. And so it's good to have different types of podcasts, right? Some that you're kind of seeing, they bring in guests, you're seeing the full picture. Some where you're actually learning actionable steps. And then we're gonna get into some more in just a second here that are gonna give you even different perspectives. The next podcast that I recommend is Tom Bilyeu's podcast. Impact Theory is really a great podcast because what I love is Tom actually dives into not just the businesses, not just the individual tactics and health strategies and different ways to live your life, but he also talks about what's the impact that it has, impact on other people, impact on the world, the businesses, what impact does this have by this business being in business. That's why, of course, it is called Impact Theory, and that's one of the reasons that I love it. And it's also a video-based podcast, so I can pull it up on YouTube. I can watch it on my TV, right? Not just listen to it in the N.E.T Time, right? No extra time, but also watching it on TV, watching it on YouTube, pulling it up on my phone. It's really valuable to add that extra component. That way you can see the guests interact with Tom in real time. So recommend Impact Theory, another great podcast. The next podcast that I love to listen to is the All In podcast. And this one's a little bit different than some of the other ones I talked about because this one is more focused around VCs, Silicon Valley, kind of that venture capital investing, the economy, more around that tech and startup world. And I really love it. It's got 4 different VC investors. Jason Calacanis actually heads it up, and he also has another great podcast as well called This Week in Startups, which is a really cool startup podcast. Talks about a lot of, especially kind of VC style early stage startups. Silicon Valley type startups. That's really valuable as well. But this podcast brings him, Chamath Palihapitiya, David Freeberg, and David Sachs. So several VC investors, kind of big Silicon Valley people. They all love to kind of play poker together. That's how they know each other. And it brings all 4 of them together to talk about the latest things that are happening in the VC world, the economy, tech, startups. Now, one thing is they do sometimes get into other areas like politics and other areas like that. Honestly, those episodes aren't my favorite, or those segments aren't my favorite. But when they talk about and they dive into VC, startups, tech, entrepreneurship, the economy, they have some really interesting takes as venture capitalists that you can really hear and understand, okay, what's their perspective? What are they looking at? How do they look at the different, valuation of companies and startups and the economy as a whole, where things are going from their perspective within tech? It's a really interesting podcast to listen to. And honestly, they're just having a conversation, which I think is one of the things that I really like, is they're having an interesting high-level conversation about VC, tech, and the economy. It's almost like you get to listen in on that conversation. So All In Podcast, another great one that I recommend. Also, side note for This Week in Startups, also by Jason Calacanis as well. That's another great podcast to listen to. And finally, we have the Tim Ferriss podcast. This is a classic in the entrepreneurial space. And honestly, my favorite reason that I like to listen to this is Tim Ferriss finds some incredible people, really interesting people, maybe people you haven't even heard of before they come onto the podcast, though usually once they're on the podcast then they get more popular. But he brings in some incredible guests, and they talk about all kinds of things, from entrepreneurship to mindset to health and wellness to biohacking. The sky's the limit. There's so many different conversations, but he brings in top people in their field to have that conversation, to really go deep, to have that longer frame of conversation, to really dive into the subject that they're talking about. So in addition to obviously, being a fan of Tim Ferriss, and I've talked about in other videos how my first company, my YouTube channel AppFind, I started 13 years ago. I turned that into the 4-hour work week and then 4-hour work month, actually, where it pays for all of my expenses just by having this YouTube channel I built and modeled after the 4-hour work week. So owe a lot of that to Tim Ferriss and his books, and also listening to him early on. But what I really like now is not just listening to him, but all of the guests that he's able to curate and bring in are really impactful and valuable. So I recommend listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, especially for the guests he brings in. So now, before we wrap up here, I also have a bonus recommendation, especially if you have an online business, you are maybe in marketing, or you've got an online business that you're growing. I recommend following Alex Hormozi here on YouTube. He's got an incredible YouTube channel. He's posting very consistent content. Now, it's not quite a podcast, but I found myself listening to it like a podcast, right? I'll throw the video up and I'll actually play it in my N.E.T Time, right? Either, earlier in the morning, at night, or maybe if I'm going on a walk. And he is just diving in. He's got hour-long videos, 30-minute videos, 15-minute videos, and he basically tells it all, right? His tagline is, "I have nothing to sell you," and he actually dives in and shares some of the latest, best business strategies. Now, I know Alex, he's an amazing guy, and he actually really wants to give as much value as possible. He now has his company acquisition.com where he's acquiring, bigger businesses, but he means it when he says he wants to help you get to that point where then, he can kind of take a look at you and see if that's a good fit. But he's just providing so much value after already having experienced a lot and really scaled and exited several different businesses for over $40 million. He exited his gym launch business, sold a couple other businesses as well. He's a really good guy. I know him personally, and he's got a great YouTube channel here, so I recommend it. It's not quite a podcast. Now, he actually has a podcast as well that I would recommend as well. I've listened to some of those, but his YouTube channel is kind of must-watch YouTube for me, that I listen to every single video that he puts out. So I recommend taking a look at Alex Hormozi's videos, really valuable. And of course, what we're looking to do is provide as much value here on our own YouTube channel. So this might not be a podcast, but make sure you turn on that bell notification icon, subscribe, turn on notifications, because we're coming out with new videos multiple times a week now. Hopefully you've noticed that. It's really exciting. A couple times a week, we have brand new videos on business, entrepreneurship, mindset, marketing, even finance and other areas that are gonna allow you to grow both as a person and in your business. That's what I'm excited about. This is only gonna keep growing and scaling from here. We wanna give as much value as possible. We may have some podcast initiatives coming in the future, so stay tuned for that. You're gonna wanna subscribe. Also, like this video, share it with a friend, and let me know, what is your favorite podcast? I'm always looking for brand new podcasts. Let me know in the comments down below. And also let me know, do you want me to share my favorite YouTube channels, business YouTube channels? I can make a video on that if you want as well. I've shared my favorite books. You can click the link here to get access and watch that video, my favorite books that I recommend. Now I've shared the podcast. If you want me to share my favorite YouTube videos, let me know down there in the comments below as well, and I can do that too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.